The mansion stood quiet that evening, far quieter than usual. For a man who had built his empire through boardroom battles and endless meetings, arriving home early was a rare luxury. Richard Allen, a self-made millionaire known across the city for his chain of luxury car dealerships, pulled into the driveway of his grand suburban home. He had left the office before sunset, surprising even himself, hoping to spend a calm evening with his wife, Laura. But as he stepped out of his sleek black Mercedes, something in the air felt off. A strange unease hung heavy. The kind of silence that makes you think the house is holding a secret it doesn't want you to hear. Richard walked up the marble steps, carrying nothing but the thought of relaxation, yet the moment he unlocked the door, faint noises drifted through the hall. Sounds that didn't belong. Not laughter, not music, but something sharp, something that instantly tightened his chest. He moved quietly, his expensive shoes pressing against the polished wooden floor. As he got closer to the living room, the muffled noise became clearer. It was a cry, a child's cry. And not just crying, the desperate whimpering of someone being hurt. Richard froze for half a second. His wife had told him she'd be spending the evening preparing for her charity gala, going over decorations and dresses. But what he heard had nothing to do with charity, and everything to do with cruelty. He rounded the corner, and that's when the sight hit him like a punch. Laura, his elegant, perfectly groomed wife, always so concerned about appearances, always the picture of sophistication, was standing over a little girl, no older than 9. The girl lay curled on the floor, her hands shielding her face, her dark skin marked by fresh bruises. And Laura was kicking her, not once, not in frustration, but again and again with sharp, deliberate force, her diamond bracelet flashing under the chandelier lights each time her hand swung for balance. For a second, Richard's mind refused to believe what his eyes saw. His wife, the woman he had defended at countless business parties, the woman who smiled sweetly in every magazine photo beside him, was attacking a child. Not just any child, but the daughter of their maid, Angela, a loyal woman who had worked for their family for years, cleaning up their messes, caring for their home with humility and gratitude. Richard's chest tightened with rage. His voice finally broke free, louder than he expected, echoing through the walls. "Laura, what are you doing?" Laura froze mid-kick, her heel hovering over the trembling child. Her head whipped around, her face painted with shock that quickly shifted into nervous irritation. She hadn't expected him home this early. She hadn't expected him at all. You weren't supposed to—" "Supposed to what?" His voice thundered as he rushed forward, scooping the child into his arms. The little girl buried her face into his chest, trembling like a leaf. He could feel her heartbeat racing against his shirt. "Supposed to not see you brutalizing a child in my own house?" Laura's expression twisted, her mask of elegance slipping into something far uglier. "You don't understand," she snapped. "This girl, she broke the vase. That vase cost more than her mother's entire salary. She was being careless, running around, making a mess." "A vase?" Laura roared, his voice cracking with disbelief. "You're telling me you were beating a 9-year-old girl over a piece of porcelain?" Laura's lips tightened, but she pressed on. "It's not just that. These people, they come into our house, they take advantage, they think because we're kind enough to let them live here and work here, they can do whatever they like. I won't tolerate it. Discipline is necessary." Her words were cold, soaked in arrogance and something darker that Richard suddenly realized he had been blind to for far too long. He looked down at the girl in his arms, her big brown eyes red from tears, her small body shaking. This wasn't discipline. This was cruelty. Pure, ugly cruelty. And in that moment, Richard felt something shift inside him. His entire life had been about business, about building wealth, about maintaining appearances. He had ignored the small cracks, the subtle hints that Laura's charm was more about masks than kindness. But seeing her standing there, trying to justify violence against an innocent child, ripped those illusions apart. "Go upstairs," Richard said coldly, his voice low but sharper than any scream. "What? You can't be serious." "I said, pack your things." The power in his tone made even her take a step back. The little girl whimpered, clutching his shirt tighter. Richard bent down to her level, softening his voice for her. "You're safe now. Nobody is going to hurt you again. Where's your mother, sweetheart?" The girl sniffled, whispered, "She's cleaning the upstairs guest room." Richard's chest burned. Angela had trusted them, trusted his household to be safe for her daughter while she worked. And Laura had betrayed that trust in the cruelest way imaginable. He carried the child upstairs, ignoring Laura's frantic footsteps behind him. Angela appeared in the hallway, wiping her hands on her apron, surprised to see Richard home. But when she saw her daughter clutched in his arms, bruised and crying, her face fell into pure horror. "Mr. Allen, what happened? Oh my God, what happened to my baby?" Angela took her daughter into her arms, rocking her, whispering soothing words through her own tears. The sight was almost unbearable. Richard turned to Laura, his jaw tight, his eyes burning with fury. "Angela, take your daughter, go to your room, lock the door. Nobody will touch her again. Do you hear me?" Angela looked up at him, confused, but nodded quickly, carrying her daughter away. Laura folded her arms, her shrill voice, "Richard, you are overreacting. You're letting emotions cloud your judgment. She's just a maid's child. Do you realize what this could do to our reputation if word gets out? People will twist the story. They'll make it look worse than it is." "Worse than it is!" Richard's laugh was hollow, a sound filled with rage and disbelief. "Laura, there is no worse than this. You were kicking a child. Do you even hear yourself? Do you know what kind of monster you sound like right now?" But Laura's arrogance only deepened. She wasn't apologizing. She wasn't ashamed. She was worried about reputation, about money, about things that suddenly felt meaningless to Richard compared to the trembling child he had just held. And as he looked at her, standing there in her designer dress, clutching her jewelry like armor, Richard knew something with absolute certainty. His life would never be the same after tonight, because what he did next would shock everyone. The house, once a palace of luxury and pride, now felt like a cage, suffocating with secrets. Richard paced the hallway, his heart pounding. The echo of Laura's heel striking that child's frail body replayed in his mind over and over, each memory sharper than a knife. He wanted to believe there was some mistake, some misunderstanding, but the bruises on that little girl's arms and the terror in her eyes told the truth louder than anything Laura could say. Angela sat in the guest room, cradling her daughter close. Richard stood by the door, watching, guilt washing over him like a tide. For years he had believed his wealth ensured safety, that his home was a sanctuary. Yet here, under his own roof, a child had been brutalized by the woman he had vowed to protect, cherish, and trust. Angela finally looked up at him, her voice trembling but laced with pain. "Mr. Allen, why? Why would she do this to my baby? We've been nothing but loyal to your family." Richard swallowed hard. The weight of responsibility pressed on him. "Angela, I don't have an excuse. There isn't one. What she did is unforgivable. I promise you, this ends tonight." Angela's tears fell onto her daughter's hair. "I should leave. I can't stay here, not after this." But Richard shook his head firmly. "No, you won't leave. She will." His tone was cold, certain. When he turned back into the hall, Laura was waiting. She leaned against the wall with her arms crossed, her face twisted into that same mixture of entitlement and irritation. She hadn't shed a single tear, hadn't shown an ounce of regret. "Are you finished playing hero?" she sneered. "Because we need to talk about how you're going to fix this before it blows up in our faces." Richard's eyes narrowed. "Fix this?
Laura, there is no fixing this. There's only accountability. Laura scoffed, brushing a strand of golden hair over her shoulder. Accountability? Don't be ridiculous. She's a maid. Her word against mine? Who do you think society will believe? Me or some poor woman who scrubs toilets for a living? Her words were poison, dripping with arrogance, and Richard felt his blood boil. For years he had ignored the little comments she made at parties, the dismissive way she spoke to waiters, the impatience with staff. He had told himself she was just particular, just stressed, just misunderstood. But now he saw it all clearly. Laura didn't see people. She saw hierarchies. Those beneath her were tools, disposable. And she had just proven how cruelly she could enforce that belief. Richard stepped closer, his voice low and dangerous. Do you hear yourself? Do you realize what you're saying? I'm saying, Laura, that if you don't think carefully, you'll ruin everything we've built. The company, the reputation, the parties, the influence, gone. All because of one mistake. Richard's laugh was bitter, hollow. A mistake? Laura, forgetting someone's name at a gala is a mistake. What you did tonight was a crime. Her face hardened, and for the first time, a flicker of fear passed across her eyes. But it wasn't fear of guilt. It was fear of consequences. What are you going to do, Richard? Call the police? Air our dirty laundry? People will think you've lost control of your household. The press will eat you alive. Richard stared at her for a long moment. The woman before him wasn't the same woman he had once fallen in love with. Or maybe she was, and he had just never seen her clearly until now. I'd rather be eaten alive by the press, he said coldly, than live another day married to a monster. The words landed like a gunshot. Laura flinched, her composure cracking for the first time. You don't mean that, she whispered. But Richard's eyes told her he did, every syllable. Before she could answer, the sound of soft footsteps came from the hall. Angela's daughter peeked out of the guest room, her small face peering around the doorframe. She was holding a teddy bear, its fur worn from years of love. Her eyes, still swollen from crying, met Richard's. The sight nearly broke him. That little girl would carry tonight's scars for a long time, scars not just on her body, but on her heart. He couldn't erase what happened, but he could decide what happened next. He knelt down in the hall, his voice steady but kind. Sweetheart, listen to me. You're safe now. Nobody is ever going to hurt you again. Not while I'm here. The girl didn't speak, but she nodded slowly, clutching her teddy bear tighter. Laura rolled her eyes, her tone sharp. Oh, for heaven's sake, Richard, stop with the theatrics. She'll forget this in a week. That was it, the final straw. Richard stood tall, his presence commanding, his decision final. You have 1 hour, Laura. 1 hour to pack your things and leave this house. If you're not gone by then, I'll make the call myself. She'd dropped her jaw. You wouldn't dare. Try me. His voice was ice, colder than she had ever heard it. Laura's eyes darted from him to Angela's door, to the child peeking out, then back to him. Realizing she had no leverage, she stormed off toward their bedroom, muttering under her breath. Richard exhaled, the weight of years of denial finally collapsing. He walked back to Angela's room, where she sat quietly rocking her daughter. Her eyes lifted to his, filled with both gratitude and sorrow. I'll understand if you want to leave, Angela, Richard said softly. After what happened, I wouldn't blame you. Angela shook her head. Mr. Allen, I don't know what tomorrow holds, but tonight you protected my child. For that, I'll never forget you. Her words pierced him. For the first time in years, Richard wasn't thinking about his wealth or reputation. He was thinking about people, real people. And he realized something he had never truly considered. What was the point of riches if they blinded you to humanity? As the night deepened, Laura's footsteps and the slamming of drawers echoed upstairs. Richard stayed near Angela and her daughter, ensuring they felt safe. At one point, the little girl dozed off in her mother's arms, still holding her teddy bear. Richard stood there, silently promising himself that he would never allow such cruelty under his roof again. An hour later, Laura dragged her suitcases down the grand staircase, her face pale with fury. She stopped in front of Richard, her voice low and venomous. "You'll regret this. You'll regret humiliating me." Richard met his gaze, unflinching. "The only thing I regret is not seeing who you truly were sooner." And with that, he opened the door. Laura glared at him one last time before stepping out into the night, her luggage wheels clattering on the stone path. The door shut behind her, and for the first time in years, the house felt lighter. But Richard knew this was only the beginning. Tomorrow people would talk, the staff would whisper, maybe the press would find out, but none of that mattered. What mattered was the child sleeping peacefully in the next room, safe for the first time that night. And deep down, Richard knew his choices tonight would shock not just Laura, not just Angela, but everyone who thought they knew who Richard Allen really was.
The morning sun crept through the tall glass windows of the Allen estate, painting the marble floors in gold. Yet despite the beauty of the dawn, the house carried a heavy silence. Laura was gone, her absence leaving an emptiness that felt both jarring and liberating. But Richard knew the storm had only begun. Downstairs, the smell of fresh coffee drifted from the kitchen. Angela, with tired eyes and a worn spirit, was preparing breakfast for her daughter. The little girl sat at the table, her teddy bear perched beside her plate like a guardian. Though her smile was faint, there was a quiet relief in her presence. Richard entered the room, his face lined with exhaustion. He had hardly slept, pacing through the night, replaying every moment, every word, every choice. He wasn't just a husband anymore. He was a man standing at the edge of scandal, responsibility, and redemption. Angela stood quickly when she saw him. "Mr. Allen, I've been thinking. Maybe it's better if we leave. This isn't safe for my daughter anymore." Richard raised his hand gently. "Angela, please, sit. We need to talk." She hesitated, but obeyed, her eyes cautious. "I know what you're afraid of," Richard said softly. "You're worried Laura will come back or that people will blame you. But listen to me. None of this is your fault, and I won't let either of you suffer for what she did." Angela's voice cracked. "But she's your wife. People will believe her. They always believe people like her." Richard looked at the little girl, who was quietly nibbling a piece of toast. He said, "Then we'll show them the truth." Angela blinked. "The truth?" Richard nodded. "Last night, after she went upstairs, I pulled the footage from the security cameras. It's all there. Every second. What she did, what she said." Angela gasped, covering her mouth. For years, Richard had used those cameras only for protection against thieves, never imagining they would capture the greatest theft of all, his wife's humanity. Now, they were the key to justice. Angela's daughter spoke softly, her voice small but clear. "Does that mean she can't hurt me anymore?" Richard's chest tightened. "That means no one will ever hurt you again. Not while I'm alive." Later that afternoon, Richard drove into the city, the USB drive burning like fire in his pocket. He wasn't going to bury this under wealth or silence. He wasn't going to pay people off or twist the story. He was going to expose it, no matter the cost. At the offices of his company, whispers followed him. News had spread quickly. Laura had left the estate in the middle of the night, furious and humiliated. Employees speculated, board members murmured, but Richard ignored them all.
He entered the conference room where his top executives awaited. Normally, these meetings were about profits, expansions, and strategy. Today, it was about truth. He stood at the head of the table, his voice steady. "I know there are rumors flying around. I won't insult you by denying them. Yes, Laura is gone. And yes, there's a reason. Last night, she crossed a line no human being should ever cross." The room was silent, the weight of his words pressing down. He continued, "For years, I believed reputation was everything, that wealth, success, and appearances defined us. But last night I learned something. What defines us is how we treat those who have nothing to give us in return." He pulled out the USB drive and placed it on the table. "This shows the truth, and I will make sure the world sees it. No cover-ups, no lies. If that costs me business, so be it. If that costs me everything, I'll accept it. But I will not allow cruelty to be hidden behind my name." The executives exchanged uneasy glances. One of them finally spoke. "Richard, this could destroy us. The press, the investors." "Let it," Richard interrupted firmly. "Better to lose fortune than lose my soul." That evening, the footage made its way to the media. The story exploded. Headlines blared, "Millionaire's wife exposed for abuse of Maid's child. Husband turns her in." The public reaction was swift and fierce. Laura's carefully crafted image crumbled overnight. Socialites who once flocked to her parties now distanced themselves. Influential friends who admired her elegance now condemned her cruelty. But more shocking was Richard's decision. Instead of hiding behind lawyers, he stood before cameras and admitted the truth openly. He confessed during a live interview, "I failed. I failed to see who my wife really was. I failed to protect a child under my own roof. But I will not fail again. From this day forward, my wealth will serve people, not destroy them." The nation watched as a millionaire chose principle over power. Some mocked him, saying he had thrown away status for sentiment. Others called him a hero. But for Richard, none of it mattered. What mattered was the small smile on Angela's daughter's face when she realized the whole world finally knew what had happened. Laura, meanwhile, faced the consequences. The evidence was undeniable. Charges were filed. Her arrogance turned into desperation, her glamorous life into courtrooms and headlines she could no longer control. Weeks later, the Allen estate felt different. Not just quieter, but warmer. Angela and her daughter remained not as servants, but as guests, protected, respected, valued. Richard set up a trust fund for the little girl's education, vowing she would never struggle for opportunity again. One night, as they all sat together at the dining table, Richard looked at the child and said, "You're stronger than most adults I know. And one day, when you grow up, I hope you'll remember not the pain of that night, but the power of surviving it." The girl smiled shyly, hugging her teddy bear. Angela wiped tears from her eyes, whispering, "Thank you, Mr. Allen, for everything." Richard shook his head gently. "Don't thank me. Thank yourself. You gave me the chance to be better. I won't waste it." And so, the man who once measured life in dollars and deals learned to measure it in dignity and humanity. His choice had shocked society, scandalized the wealthy, and inspired countless others who felt unseen. Because in the end, it wasn't his fortune that defined him. It was the night he came home early, saw the truth, and chose to stand on the side of justice, no matter the cost.